So, AEW is planning to have what they call the Grand Slam week next week on TNT. And it's basically going to be 4 hours in total. Now, I mentioned this in the previous video that I did, talking about the Brian Danielson Omega match that's set for that week, and how basically both shows are going to be at 2 hours, that being Rampage on Friday and Dynamite on Wednesday, thus combining for 4 hours, if you will, of entertainment from one location. Now, the only thing that people wonder is how they're going to basically schedule this. Is Dynamite going to be first? Is Rampage going to be first? We don't know. It would make sense that Rampage would be first. That way you give people a little bit of an intermission, then you go and then you do Dynamite. But we'll see. We'll see what they do. I mean, they obviously plan to start around 5 o'clock Eastern time. They got to start at 5. That's the most obvious thing, because you go 4 hours, you're going to go to midnight there. I mean, that's possible. They can do it at 8 o'clock, but I got a feeling they're going to start at 5, and that's going to be the Rampage tapings. And then after the Rampage taping is done, then they're going to go to Grand Slam, which starts at 7. So it makes sense to do that. And it may seem a little awkward if you start seeing, like, let's say, blue sky, like what you see in the back of me, basically penetrating down if they have the roof open and everything. If it's nice out, it's going to be a little awkward, but it'll make a lot more sense in the long run if they do that, because of the fact that, again, they have to, start early to end on time, because, again, nothing against them probably going 8 to midnight, but I don't think anybody's going to want to stay that late. And knowing New York, how it is right now, and how it's recommending people having vaccinations, which is a key thing there too. It's a key thing there too. I want to mention that real quickly. New York basically has made it mandatory that you either have to show proof of vaccination or you can't attend an event. You either got to show proof of vaccination, or you get a test, or you have to mask up. That's pretty much it. Basically what's going on here is what New York, here in California, and other parts of the country are doing is, as much as they probably don't want to, depending on how you view that, depending on how much they don't want to, like I said, depending on how you view that, they are basically forcing your hand. They're saying, hey, you're making us treat you like a child to allow you to go anyplace, Ace, and everything. So you're forcing us to make you do this when you should just be doing it of your own free will. So, yeah, apparently that's a big issue going on that may hurt the attendance for both nights at Grand Slam, but we'll see. And it's going to be interesting, because this is also going to be a huge test and a one-night shot for AEW to be in front of a crowd for 4 hours. I mean, they're used to doing it sometimes with the AEW pay-per-views, and that's fine and everything. But, this is the New York crowd. They could be a little bit more restless. They could be a little bit more substandatory, if you know what I mean. They could be a totally different crowd. Heck, they could be pro WWE for all we know, and they can end up being silent for most of the night, or at least one of the hours of the 4 during those 2 nights, just to kind of, be rebellious towards All Elite Wrestling. Who's to say? But yeah, the crowd, I don't think it'll be affected that much, but the obvious catch right now is people have to be vaccinated, or at least show proof of vaccination. Well, basically both are one and the same, but basically they have to be vaccinated, show the proof they're vaccinated, or they got to get tested, or they got to basically get the vaccine and then show, hey, I got at least the first one, to probably get in and may have to mask up, who knows. But anyway, it looks like it's an interesting lineup here for Grand Slam, for the Grand Slam week, if you will. Again, it's 4 hours, so you're going to have Grand Slam night 1 on Wednesday, which is Dynamite, and then Grand Slam night 2, which is Rampage. And it's the only time that Rampage is going to, it's the only time Rampage as of right now is going to be 2 hours. Now, my suspicions, remember, they made a deal when they kind of renegotiated the contract for, I think, another year or so that they currently have with Turner Networks, that TNT would be getting a couple of quarterly specials on the network starting this year, and I think honestly this is part of that. That these two-night events are part of that. But enough of me talking. Let's go down the card and see what they have to offer on these nights. Now, of course, they're going to have like in-ring promos and interviews and stuff. So that's to help pan out the entire shows, as normal. But here's what they're going to have for the show. For night one, Dynamite, on Wednesday, they are going to have FTR versus Sting and Darby Allin. This ought to be a good match, and I think if I was to make a prediction, I'd say FTR and Darby Allin are going to go over. I mean, I'm hoping maybe tomorrow night, if anything, they touch upon Tully Blanchard's history with Sting and everything. So, that to kind of add a little bit more oomph to it. So, maybe they may do that, maybe they won't. I don't know. The next match that they have on there is MJF versus Brian Pilman Jr. This ought to be a good match, and I expect this will be the next step in the split of Waldro, if you will, and MJF, because I predict Brian Pilman Jr. probably winning, but he won't win clean. I mean, he'll win clean, but it'll be off a miscue of MJF and Waldro. So to continue that storyline of building maybe to potential match between the two at Full Gear, that being Waldo and MJF. We have a championship match, the only championship match on Dynamite that night. It's going to be Britt Baker, Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, versus Ruby Soho, the former Ruby Riott. I don't see a title change happening here just yet. I see Britt retaining. The only way I can see a title change happening is because AEW would want to stick it along with Ruby. They would want to stick it to WWE and say, hey, see, you could have had this. You could have had this happen on your show, on your turf, but we have it happen here on one of our grandest nights, grandest events we've had in our short history, because this is going to supposedly be in front of the biggest crowd ever, second maybe to the United Center, maybe surpassing it perhaps as well. So, but honestly, I don't see him doing a title change just yet. I think Ruby Soho she's eventually going to get the title. She's going to get the title, but this is going to be very similar to what we saw with, what we're going to probably see later that night with the main event, if you will. But to me, this is going to be similar to that, as well as similar to the first Christian Cage Omega match, to where I see Britt retaining by disqualification, but it sets up Ruby to get a rematch down the line, maybe in a cage or something like that, with Britt to take the title from her. I just don't see a title change happening right now. I mean, yes, Ruby just showed up, and it would be great to put the title on her, maybe just for a brief period before it goes back to Britt, especially to get people's attention, to be like, hey, you need to watch Dynamite when you get home to see the title change. But I just don't see it happening here. And if it does, we'll see. But I don't really see it happening. But again, if it does, I also see it kind of being like AEW, shoving it in WWE's face and saying, hey, look, Ruby Soho, your former Ruby Riott's our champion now. You could have had this. But we'll have to see what they do. Again, I'm going to go with Britt retaining, but Ruby winning by DQ. They're going to have a CM Punk live interview that night, which is 48 hours before his event, before his match against Powerhouse Will Hobbs. Now that's kind of a little interesting thing here, because if they're going to do a live interview with him on Dynamite 48 hours before Rampage, that kind of makes me wonder whether or not Rampage is going to be taped last. And if it is, then okay, fine. They can still do the 5 to 7 deal for Dynamite, and then they can do the Rampage afterwards, which would be 7 to 9. So it would make sense maybe if they do it that way too. We'll see. Then we have Cody Rhodes against Malachi Black, the former Aleister Black. Honestly, I know a lot of people don't want to look at it. They don't want to look at it this way, but we have seen in the past that when Cody gets squashed and annihilated by guys like Aleister Black, like the former late Brody Lee, John Harper, the John Harper, I think, or Luke Harper, if you will. Anytime we've seen him get squashed like that, he seems to come back. Like with Brody, with the late Brody Lee, when Brody came back in and annihilated him and won the TNT title from him in a squash, what did he do? He came back, darkened his hair, put themselves into a dog collar match, and he won back the title. He got his win back. Hopefully they don't do that here, because you got to keep Malachi strong. But if they do it here, I can already see, honestly, I could see OTRS Central coming on in their review and saying that once again they're feeling founder vibes coming from Cody, because when Jeff says he feels founder vibes coming from Cody when it comes to stuff like this, is because it's a similar tactic that happened with TNA and Jeff Jarrett, and hopefully that doesn't happen here. But I could see him saying it, and I could see a lot of backlash coming Cody's way if that's booked to go in that direction. If it's booked for Cody to get his win back at Grand Slam at Arthur Ashe Stadium, but hopefully that doesn't happen, and we'll just have to wait and see what they do. But to me, I'm gonna go Malachi Black. You got to keep him strong. And then the main event, Kenny Omega, Brian Danielson. This is the match that everybody's been wanting to see, even when Bryan earlier this year was still in WWE as part, as Daniel Bryan, as part of Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, and all that. This is the match they've been wanting to see. Even when Kenny was in Japan, this is the match they wanted to see, and now they're going to get it. The question is, who goes over? My assumption is they're going to have Kenny put Daniel over. They're going to put Danielson over here, basically to build upon the fact that Kenny's not as good as he says he is. And I expect maybe them to add a little bit more to the match. Like, I could see Tony Khan maybe coming out and making the announcement that nobody, not even the Elite or Super Click, whatever you want to call them, is going to be allowed at ringside, because if they are, they will be fired, or whatever the case may be. And they just keep it one-on-one, no questions asked. So I'm going to go with Danielson in his first match with AEW to beat Omega. This is going to be the main event. I mean, you put this on last, as far as Dynamite is concerned, nothing's going to follow it. Nothing's going to follow. If you put this on last, as far as Dynamite is concerned, nothing's going to follow it. Period. Yeah, they got Rampage that comes on afterwards, but I think they're going to do a bit of an intermission where they change the ring aprons and all that. So, again, I don't think anybody's going to be, as far as Dynamite on its own is concerned, nobody will be able to follow it. And I'm going to go with Danielson to get the win. Then 2 nights later, they have the special 2-hour edition of Rampage called Rampage Grand Slam. We have a trios match, 6-man tag, which is the Young Bucks and Adam Cole, or as he calls them, the Super Click, which again ties into what I talked about earlier with this whole, Danielson Omega segment from last night, basically being like another layer added to the inevitable Omega face turn, because now you have Adam Cole referring to the group as the Super Click, not the Super Elite or the Elite. So anyway, we have Adam Cole and the Young Bucks against Christian Cage, Luchasaurus, and Jungle Boy. This is a toss-up because, Adam Cole just came in. You want to keep him strong and everything, but you also want to keep, Jurassic Express as a team, as a group strong. You want to keep Christian still as the Impact World Champion and part of your roster strong. So it's a toss-up. I'm going to go, honestly, with Jungle Boy pinning Adam Cole. Like, Adam Cole's going to win. Like, okay, you gave Adam Cole his first win over Kazarian Kaz last night, and that's great. That was to be expected. But I'm going to go and say that Jungle Boy pins Adam Cole here to win the trios match. And then maybe you continue, and then you start a program towards Full Gear between those two, which I think would be money. As to quote the Lex Man, or just Alex sometimes when he looks at something like that, you have Jungle Boy pin Adam Cole here, and then maybe you have Adam Cole attack him afterwards or something. To me, that's money. That is money right there. If you focus on that kind of a matchup towards Full Gear. Then we have Chris Jericho and Jake Haber, I think. Jake Haber, the former Jack Swagger, taking on Scorpio Sky and Ethan Page, now of America's Top Team. I definitely see this being a good matchup. I can't say who's going to come out on top though, because you want to. I mean, you're associating Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky with America's Top Team and Dan Lambert, and you're trying to keep that strong and potentially build to perhaps him getting this huge faction together to go against AEW, because I believe that's where we're heading. Whether people want to admit it or not, I think that's where we're heading. And then on the other side, you have you're now adding in Chris Jericho. You're adding in Chris Jericho, who was the former world champ, and Jake Haber, or Jack Swagger, if you will, as well. I definitely see a good matchup, and I'm going to go with Top Team. If I was to pick somebody, even though it's a toss-up to me, I'm going to go with America's Top Team. And you know what? I'm going to call it right now. I would not be surprised if they have Jake Hager, yeah, that's his name, Jake Hager, turn on Jericho. I would not be surprised. Because America's Top Team, basically it's a mixture of MMA and wrestling. Basically it's a combat fighting team. Who better to basically become a turncoat and align himself with them and make that faction stronger than Jake Hager. So I could see potentially Hager turning on Jericho. That would give Ethan Page and Scorpio Sky the win for them in America Top Team. But we'll see. Maybe they won't do it, and they'll still have them go over. We'll see. But I'm gonna go with them. You got momentum for them. You want to keep that momentum going. I go with that. And then the main event for that night is going to be CM Punk and Powerhouse Will Hobbs. It's going to be a physical matchup. Obviously, Powerhouse Hobbs will outpower Punk, but I'm going to probably see Punk winning the match. But I see it because we will have Brian Cage interfere. He will try to keep Hook and Ricky Starks. So Ricky Starks comes down, and maybe even Taz, try to keep them away from the match. But it's going to be a physical matchup to close out the Rampage portion of Grand Slam. But I am going to go with CM Punk over Will Hobbs. And I think Brian Cage is going to get involved to make sure that happens. But yeah, that's pretty much my predictions, my thoughts on the upcoming AEW Grand Slam week. Next week on TNT with Dynamite and Rampage. They may add more matches tomorrow night. So we'll see what else they add. And if they do, I might come on here and do an update. Who knows? Or I'll leave that to the likes of Just Alex to do it. But yeah, that's all I'm going to say on it, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are. Which matches are you looking forward to the most on these 2 nights next week for AEW? And schedule-wise, who do you think is going to go on first? Do you think it's going to be Rampage first, then Dynamite, or the other way around? So yeah, let me know what your thoughts are. In closing, comment below, live chat during the premiere, like the video, check out the Teespring store, and I am out.